In today's episode of HR Visionaries, we talk to Gabrielle from 1Password. We talk about why safety and online security is a very convincing argument in winning over talents. Stay tuned. Welcome to HR Visionaries, where we unlock the secrets of modern HR. I'm Benjamin, your host. Join us as we shed light on today's HR universe with HR leaders and innovators from across the globe. Whether you're an HR pro, a business leader, or just curious about the future of work, this is your shortcut to the forefront of HR innovation. Brought to you by Hire, the AI talent attraction platform. Welcome to our new episode of HR Visionaries. I'm looking forward to our guest today, Gabrielle. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Gabrielle, can you tell us in a few sentences, who are you?
Yeah, sure. So I am Gabrielle. I am in Montreal. I work at 1Password. I am the VP of Talent, People Insights, and DEIB. So I wear a variety of hats. I've been there for a year and a half. And before that, spent the bulk of my career in consulting. I am passionate about people. I'm a mom of 2 girls. And I love the outdoors. Yes. Me in a nutshell.
What do you love outdoors?
Oh, good question. Depends on the season. In the winter.
Let's say winter. Let's stick with winter.
Okay. I love downhill skiing and I love backcountry. So when you hike up with skins and
okay, cool. So that means you enjoy also your time outdoors in Canada. There are quite a number of opportunities, I guess.
Yes, very much so.
Oh, that's very cool. And well, since we're unfortunately not here to talk about skiing, which I of course also like a lot. So at 1Password, what do you guys do?
Yeah, so 1Password is most known for its app to protect passwords. So that's how it was created about 18 years ago. So we are founded by, we have 4 founders who are 2 couples actually, started in a small town out of Ontario. And they just wanted to keep people safe. They wanted to help people out, help people have safe passwords and keep them all in one place. And we developed the product, to have it be available on like multiple platforms and grew like that over time. And now we're really branching out to be a multi-product. So we've gone into passwordless in the last year and just continuing to refine the offerings, always with like a priority and a mission to keep people safe, but also keeping it simple to make sure that it's simple to stay safe.
Okay, so your 4 founders were 2 couples.
Yes, they're still couples.
Okay, well, that's a great story.
Yeah, they're still involved, some more than others. Sarah, one of our founder, is still very involved. She leads our CX function, our customer experience function. And so it's really great because after all these years and even at the size that we're at today, so we actually hit the 1,000 employee mark about a month ago or so. We still get to interact with her. I get to interact with her pretty frequently. And so it's nice to know that she's still proud of the company that we've grown into today, and that she's still just as passionate about it. And same with her husband and the other founders. But I think that's a pretty cool factor after all these years.
Oh, absolutely. And I must say, I think I've never spoken to a company that has 2 couples as founders. So I think it's actually pretty cool indeed. And that's super cool. And so you guys look at safety of people. So in the online world, obviously, password safety is a big issue. So everyone's probably super afraid of, well, password being stolen. So how can I picture your product working for me?
Well, in many ways, actually. So it can work for you. The cool thing is it can work for you personally and it can work for you as a business. So we try to make sure that both really work in sync together to keep it as easy and as simple as possible. we think it always starts with a personal journey, and the better the personal journey, the more you become a bit of a brand ambassador and you talk about it and you're excited to use it at work. Obviously, like many consumer apps, or like many, the more people like it, the more people use it, the better it is. And so the better it is for you specifically. The way you can imagine using it or serving it is you probably have logins for many hundreds of different sites and different tools and things like that. So that allows you to just on your phone or on your computer have one place where you can store them all, and it generates them for you. So it generates these like, you know, instead of using I love skiing, for example, you're able to have like XYZ cap lock 8V underscore and like something that's very safe. So it's reassuring. It's funny, me and my husband would say when we first, when I joined 1Password and I downloaded the app, we were like, after having created our will to take care of like if something happens to us one day, we said the day we did our wills, we felt very grown up and very responsible. And then we got 1Password, and then we had a lot of that same feeling. We're like, oh wow, we're getting our things under control now. We all know, and we have a shared account, so we can share password and logins, and it makes it like super easy. Even as our kids grow up, we can use that. And with parents, same thing at the company. We share docs within, we share docs with each other. With that, we share logins and things like that. And there are a lot of more products to come. It'll be an exciting year for us at 1Password. I can't say too much here today, but I think the niche of what we do, there are a lot of really good opportunities to increase safety through that baseline.
Is this correct? If I imagine there are kind of two customer journeys, so people that are very conscious of safety, and then the other people are those that, well, experienced an issue themselves or with friends, and are like, okay, dang, that won't happen to me again. So is it those two?
Those are probably the two common ones. And then we're talking about that as an individual. That I think that holds true for companies as well. So there's like small companies that want to keep it safe, and they're like, oh, this will be a good way to organize ourselves within. And then there's companies that go through difficult breaches or frauds and things like that. And even professional services firms would tell them, okay, now we're going to get things under control. One of the things you should do is get a password manager. So I've actually heard that from friends who own companies, that we become part of the recommendation. So I think there's those two. And then there's people that are just like, something's not working. This piece of paper with all my passwords. Like, then there's probably the in-between that's just like, there's got to be a better solution out there. It's not that they're looking to be safe, or it's not that there is a big problem, but they're just like, this feels off, and so it's like part of the evolution, I guess.
How does it feel to work for a company that kind of democratizes that sense of safety, given, well, it said, okay, talk about the will, for example, which is like a super important thing to do. However, well, some people shy away because it's costly, and if you do it correct, it's kind of costly. So how does it give you a purpose in your daily life?
That's a really good question. So I decided to join because I felt a sense of purpose with what they were doing. I really believe that I love people and I love HR, but I do love doing it in a place that also has a greater purpose. So when I was reading the blogs, one of their founders, Dave, had a blog where he talks about the product and things that he's passionate about. And I was like, the passion that everybody brings to really keep people safe. It's not just a product. It's not just an app. It's really a mission. It's a vision. And that gave me great pride. I was like, I want to be part of that. I want to be part of growing that. So it feels great. It feels like it's very much needed. And a lot of the conversations we have, password managers are important for aging populations. While they're not always the most technology savvy, they do need help, and like their families, the caregivers that take care of them, need better ways to be able to have access to all the accounts and things like that. We were talking about also mental health. There are a lot of stats that show that when you're going through difficult mental health period, anxiety and things like that, our memory falls short, right? That's often some things like password becomes super difficult and very much a heavy load to carry. And so again, I think of mental health frequently as an HR leader. Here's the company that's also trying to do good in that space. Same with diversity and inclusion. We always try to take an accessibility lens to our product. I try to make sure that people feel seen and are able to operate well at work. Well, my product does the same for its consumers. So I just found that it took stock of where society is today and what's happening, and is creating a product for it to help keep it simple. And it's not like it's a crazy expensive product, right? It's very accessible. So it's a bit of a time investment at the beginning to create it and get it all set up and everything. But after that, it's just so easy and it's like second nature. And so I just thought it was like a nice parallel between being an HR leader. Generally, HR leaders want to do well and do good. Well, this product does too. So best of both.
And is that in particular in an environment with an aging population, and well, more and more services are now digital and will forever be digital? Okay, so it's like a gigantic amount of passwords one might need to remember. Ideally, well, when people tell me, "Hey, I have a great solution for that. I just use 1Password," it's like, okay, I'm not sure that's actually the best solution I've heard so far. So that's the thing, right? So you kind of like work with the population that is more and more reliable on safety online. So you mentioned you care also a lot about culture in your role. How does that well, how did you, when you joined, experience the culture at 1Password?
So one of the things that's always been true about 1Password is fully remote and has been since inception. So we're one of the rare companies that's always how we've done things, and that's a core part of our culture. So so obviously going through, and before this I had been at the same company for 11 years. So the thought of onboarding a new company, starting somewhere new, was pretty intimidating by default. And then thinking about doing all that remote was an even bigger deal. But honestly, we have such a smooth onboarding process. We have someone at the company, Sean, who's been leading our onboarding for many years. And it's just such a thoughtful process, and one that we continuously refine with like feedback and everything. And we get really good feedback from it. So I think it's working well. So seeing that done well, being part of a culture where everybody's doing that, right? It's not just a few people depending on where you are geographically, but seeing that come together, I think was really like a pivotal point. After that, also just since all of our meetings are remote, since we're always remote, seeing how we build our communication skills. How do we make sure that we talk to each other well? What are all the channels that we use? The tools, all the tools that we use, and all the mechanisms. So seeing all that come together and making sure that we communicate well is part of our feedback culture. Also, when we were doing reviews, the kind of questions where we put the emphasis on reviews to make sure that we uphold to like good communication, to good feedback. Those were all things. Some of the things that I had the chance to be part of is around the time I first started, one of the hats I wear is also employer brand, but we wanted to really crystallize our values. So we have 3 values that we crystallized last year: lead with honesty, put people first, and keep it simple. Those values are really everywhere. They're on some of our swag, they're in our reviews, they're hashtags we use for certain tools. So we use Bonusly, for example, for employee recognition. Those are part of the hashtags that we use to be able to give back. So being a very like values driven company, raising that everywhere. Last year, we created these awards where you can recognize other employees, and they're all themed around our values. So just seeing all that come together, the emphasis on that and the thoughtfulness that goes behind all that to make sure that we really take care of one another, that are respectful, that we're honest, that we keep it simple, are all things that really stood out, and that I'm proud of, and that I think really culturally like make 1Password who we are.
You just mentioned employer branding as one of the hats you're wearing. So what do you focus on in employer branding when it comes to a product that, well, is mainly focused on safety? So how does that translate from the consumer brand into the employer brand?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, everything that we do, even when we think about, like, I also own talent acquisition. So whether it's the tools we use, whether it's the providers we use, also how we frame things, always needs to be consistent with, does this respect people's privacy? Does this, so we have a high standard on GDPR, for example, does this Does this help keep things secure and safe? And so it's just always, we'll sanity check everything that we do and all the providers we have and use, and the framing of things through all of that. In terms of employer brand specifically, I think the emphasis often, to be honest, is on the remote piece. It's often on the values. It's often on all of our being a remote culture. It's a great platform for DEIB, for diversity and inclusion, equity and belonging. It's a good way to make sure that people can be who they are because they're working from the comfort of their home. And in a way, I guess that keeps them psychologically safe. So it kind of ties it together, right? So I wouldn't say that like when it's more in our actions potentially than in the marketing we maybe put forward from a branding perspective.
But you just mentioned diversity and inclusion. Yes. is something you focus on a lot. So why is be as you are important to you?
I often say once you open your eyes to different realities, different contexts, different experiences and lived experiences, you can't really close your eyes to it. And it's funny, even in just saying this right now, in my stomach, I tense up. People are going through so much nowadays. Everybody has a baggage. Everybody has an experience. Everybody has something going on. And yet we need to find a way to make it work so that we can all work, because most of us need to work. And so I feel a really deep sense of purpose and mission in trying to bring those together and trying to figure out, well, how do you bring that together to give people a chance to be who they are and really thrive at work, to allow us to grow this great app or this great product that we have.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think well, be as you are and perform as you are, I think is like so strongly connected, because if you need to, well, once you enter the office, assume you have an office and you enter the office, how is it possible to change your identity and then, well, perform in a way that's great to others and that it accomplishes tasks, right? So how is that even possible? So I think it's actually really cool these days that there's so much focus on allowing everyone to act as they want to act and be as they are. So it's actually pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's like, I think as a company you need to be clear on what you stand for, what you stand by. So when we created our values, for example, we're very clear that while we want you to act as you are, it is important for us that you lead with honesty, that you keep it simple, and that you put people first. If acting as you are doesn't align with that, then maybe this isn't the place for you, right? And that's okay. So I think it's about being clear about who are we as a company, what are we trying to accomplish? And I think that goes back to employer brand and the talent acquisition process. We try to be very clear about who we are. We're also very clear. We're a fast growth company. I joined a year and a half ago. We were about 600. We're now 1,100. Things move fast. Things are scaling. Things change constantly. You have to be okay with that, right? So I think it's stating who you are as a company, what you stand for, and like what's your current state of mind. And then having that honest conversation with candidates and people and employees once they're here, and seeing, okay, well, this is us. These are all the great tools that we have. These are all the great benefits. These are all of the programs that we put forward to allow you to feel at your best. Does that fit? Is that a fit? Does that match with all of this? And this being us, are you comfortable in operating in this environment? And if so, then great, we're a match and we'll do amazing things. And if not, that's okay too.
But that also requires a lot of honesty in the hiring process, right? So even a candidate that, on paper or even after the interview looks like a great fit in terms of what kind of skills would, he or she has, the kind of skills would, add a lot to 1Password, and then have the honesty to say, okay, well, your values don't align. Okay, there's no fit.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think for sure it's honesty on both ends, right? I mean, I like to, and that's why it's one of our values, I guess, lead with honesty. But I think obviously if people aren't honest on both ends, then, you could have a bit of a misfit. But but as long as you spark those conversations during the process, and then that everybody brings that forward, then yeah, I agree. I think we can come to a great thing together.
You mentioned before you worked 11 years at your previous company. Well, after 11 years, it's quite a move to leave an established place and your established role to join a new company, isn't it?
Yes, very much so. I think the good news about 11 years is that it's a long time, but I was also in a very different space. I worked in the consulting industry, so very, very different world than the tech remote startup. I had 11 wonderful years where I grew, I developed, I did a variety of roles. I think I must have done 4 or 5 roles. And so by the end of it, I really felt like I had contributed what I could and should and wanted to. I had grown tremendously, and it felt like it was time to bring all that and challenge myself and see if I could be just as great somewhere else. When I was in the interview process, so the first person I met is my boss, the chief people officer, and she was very honest, very transparent. I felt trusted and seen, and it felt like a great platform to try something new, and it's proven just as great as expected. So it was a big move, but I think it's an important one in a career. I think it's important to also sometimes challenge yourself and switch it up.
What did convince you to join 1Password?
What it stood for. Work is an important part of my life. And I talk about work a lot at home with my husband and my girls, my kids. It's important for me that my kids are proud of what I do. And so the product and what we were doing here at 1Password was a big part of it. And then the people. And then, like I said, I think when you believe in the product and what you're trying to achieve and the company, what it stands for, and then everybody you meet feels like someone that you want to interact with on a day-to-day basis, you want to challenge yourself with to be better, to come up with new ideas. I think that's like a recipe for success. You don't want people who don't necessarily challenge you. You don't want people who are always in agreement. So you want that variety of perspective, but also a place where you feel safe to have those conversations, which is hard to imagine after 11 years. You know, after 11 years, you do build that safety very much. But it felt like that in the process. And so I said, well, let's give it a shot. And like I said, it's been a ton of fun.
Cool. Since you are a remote only company, obviously you don't have that many in-person meetings. How do you deal with like very tough conversations that one might want to have like on a personal level, eye to eye, rather than screen to screen?
That's a very good question. Well, so we do have more and more in-person meetings, but they're more like offsites or get-togethers. And when I say more and more, it depends on your role at the company, but normally you would see everyone maybe once or twice a year at a minimum, sometimes more. That's important because it does allow you to build some of that more personal connection, grow the trust base, which is also very critical to then having difficult conversations. That said, sometimes you will have difficult conversations without having had that in-person interaction. The first I often say is pick up, I always use the expression, pick up the phone. Like in this case, it's most of the time, jump on Zoom, turn the camera on, have a conversation, make it a dialogue. I think that's very, very important. So it's like creating the setup to have that difficult conversation. And then where I used to work, we had a lot of like skills that we developed to give thoughtful conversation. I think we always say, you know, assume best intent, go in the conversation. There are multiple sides of the conversation, assume best intent. And then take your time to share the feedback, be honest and like talk it through, and then always make sure that it's a two-way conversation. I often coach my team members and I say, be vulnerable. Like being in a remote culture, often when we jump on, we're problem solving. We're on a topic. It's maybe a group call. And so we build less of that personal connection. So whenever there is a chance, especially in a difficult conversation, to really like be vulnerable, explain the perspective, talk through the harder pieces of it. I think that's really important to build the trust and all of that. But most of all, honestly, it's just do it, never do it by Slack, never let it go unnoticed and assume it's going to just fix itself. You have to get on the phone, you have to have the conversation, as uncomfortable as it may be. We're including a lot of that in our trainings, in our like managers training, in our DEIB training as well. So because understanding that obviously feedback in difficult conversations can sometimes feel even more uncomfortable when you don't necessarily feel as close to the person next to you, or you feel like you might be missing important pieces of who they are or what they're going through. But so it's a question of training and then just prompting it and making sure that people actually do it.
Given that remote work culture at 1Password, how do you then also create the sense of a team? So rather than individuals sitting at home in front of their screen, being a strong team at 1Password.
Yeah, it's a good question. There are multiple ways that we go about that. The first, like I said, we're starting to have a bit more offsites where we get teams together. Obviously for us, they're being a remote company, they're not mandatory. So while the majority of folks do join them, we always try to have, if there is quite a few folks remote, we'll have a remote piece and whatnot. I think that's one of them. The second is when it's in your DNA and it's how you operate, you're not always waiting for that in-person event to do it, right? So a lot of teams will do, we'll play, let's say on my team, for example, we play code names every once in a while together. Or when we have all hands, we'll make sure we have like discussion moments. So where people break out in smaller groups and we prompt the conversation. And so it through the meeting setup, through bringing games, through having meetings that are meant to be more fun. Once a year, we have a conference that way back when used to be everyone together on a cruise, and now it's more of a virtual format. But honestly, last year we had this whole like virtual arena going and everybody had like new company swag and we were playing games and there was like shows and there were a lot of talks. And honestly, at the beginning of it, I was telling myself like, oh, how are we going to do 3 days of remote meeting and actually have fun? And like, it was just so much fun. It was so much fun. We did this like chocolate tasting event. And so honestly, it's like a lot of little prompts. And then we have fun tools. So on our Slack, we use also donut meetings. So that's like, I don't know if you're familiar with donut meetings, but it's like, it puts you together. It proposes a meeting with a few other folks, and then you get together and then it gives you a few ideas of like fun topics to discuss. So you get to know new people and you're able to have those conversations.
Are the donuts involved?
There are no donuts involved.
Okay, then I'm not interested. Sorry.
Can you believe it? Can you believe it? It's
It's a trap.
Maybe a bit. We also have like Bonusly, for example, like I was saying, so that allows you to give recognition and stuff like that. So I think it's like a variety of mechanisms, but a lot of purposefulness to create that.
Well, we spoke about diversity and inclusion before, and the remote culture, obviously enables you to, be as you are. Perhaps for some people, much more easy to be as you are when you're in a safe space at home. But does it also help with like social mobility, for example? So in terms of like, hey, you don't have to live in those fancy areas, but you can join us from wherever you are. And you don't need to commute for a long time. I can also imagine that for parents, it may be great to don't have to spend hours getting from home to kindergarten to work and all the way back.
Yeah, very much so. It helps us from a talent acquisition perspective for sure, because people, while we have 5 entities and we hire within those entities, but they can be wherever they want within those 5 countries, right? And so that's a huge advantage from a DEIB perspective. Absolutely. I mean, I'm a mom. There's a teacher's strike right now happening, so my kids are at home, and for me that's not as much of a stress as it could be if I had to be in the office, for example, when the kids are sick. And then definitely the commute, it makes it much easier for the commute. I'm commuting from one floor to the other floor. but also like you don't have to spend on gas. It's good for the environment because we're not commuting. I think also, I mean, the world's a hard place right now. There's a lot of events going on, a lot of people feeling affected by it. Having the opportunity to be remote means that, well, between meetings, you can just shut everything down and go, you know, sit in a safe space and maybe call a family member, or, you know, we have we use a few apps to help with like meditating and things like that. So take a moment to maybe just do a few breathing exercises, fix your schedule around so that you can see your family members. So I think right now being remote is really a blessing with everything that's happening in the world, very much so.
Thank you so much for all your insights. It's super cool how you deal with well, creating a team remote. It's yeah, super impressive, and well, obviously your growth story also super interesting to learn how you dealt with all those challenges in these times.
Thank you. Absolutely. I always happy to chat about them. Thanks for inviting me, Benjamin.
Thank you so much. And well, thanks for all of you to listen in. And I hope you benefited as much as I from this episode. Take care and see you next time.
See you.